Welcome to the Better Business Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Zellen. Join me week after week as I interview high-level entrepreneurs on their journey to success, both in business and personal development. Each week presents new stories to learn from and new ideas on how to run a better business. Stay updated with all the guests we'll have by subscribing to this podcast. Alrighty, welcome everybody to Better Business with Austin Zellen. Today we have Mr. Jon Orlando with us. I'm so excited because he has a very interesting business model, and I've been learning more and more about this guy. We've known each other for a while, and so we always like to talk business and alternative ways to grow our business, create a better business. So I'm very excited for you guys to hear from him how he's been able to grow his business and scale it and make it better and better year after year. So Jon, tell people a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do for business and how you've scaled that over the years.
Yeah, man. Quick background. I did stand-up comedy for 10 years. Found out I wasn't really funny. It took that long to realize that I'm not good at it. Yeah, 10 years later.
Wow.
Then I owned a PR firm in LA for 10 years. And that was pretty successful. And we saw an exit there back in 2010, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I was in the digital space for a hot minute. And for the last 7 years, going on 8, I've been hosting my own podcast called Action Junkies. And we've been building out the Junkiez brand as a network. So similar to Blue Wire here, only not as cool. But yeah, so I have Action Junkies, but there's fitness junkies, political junkies, Vegas junkies. Pretty much you can name a category, and at some point there will be the name Junkies after it.
Yeah.
And then we've got a studio here in Vegas called Paws Studios that we rent out to other shows, and it's obviously the home of all the junkie shows. And now we're starting to put podcast studios all over the country. Just opened one in Boca Raton in Florida about 6 months ago. We're working on Dallas next and a bunch of other cool spots. So so it's exciting for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that model that you're doing with the whole franchising thing, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But even like the whole Junkiez branding name, I think that's so cool because I know I've seen like online you have like this Junkiez and that Junkiez, and
thank you.
It's kind of cool how it's becoming this network, and it's all connected because people trust that name, they like that name, and they want to see what else that brand has to offer.
Yeah, the funny thing is that I kind of stumbled into it. And it's kind of a good lesson on knowing when to pivot or not be open, be open-minded in business to see opportunity that sometimes was an accident. So what I'm referring to is when I started Action Junkies, I was going to spell it the proper way, Junkies. And when I went to get actionjunkies.com, it was $18,000.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm not spending $18,000 on this website. Like I hadn't even done a podcast. I didn't know where it was going to go. I really started doing it as a fun thing, not a work or business thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, let me just get creative. So I spelled it Junkeez. Because that was $7.99.
There you go.
And then it just kind of morphed into other Junkies branded shows, and it's kind of a brand was born almost out of literally out of a mistake, or out of a necessity of I'm not shelling out 18 grand, but it was a really good mistake because it gave us our own kind of unique identity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know you've kind of pivoted from different businesses, from like PR to like now these like the network and podcasting studio. So how did you know that it was time to pivot into your next phase? I know like with the comedian thing, you didn't really like that, but
10 years, I got kind of burned out. Like it's fun working Vegas. Like I always loved doing stand up in Vegas, but how many times can you go to Minot, North Dakota to tell jokes? No offense if you're from Minot, North Dakota, but it's just living out of a suitcase every weekend. I used to open for like those older entertainers. My dad is obviously one of them, Jon Orlando, but I used to open for like Tom Jones, Paul Anka, Engelbert Humperdinck, Wayne Newton, guys like that. And I got kind of burned out. And, and then after the PR firm, I was in the digital space for a little while, and I kind of missed being on the microphone. But I didn't necessarily want to go back to stand-up comedy life. And so podcasting just seemed to make sense. There was no barrier to entry, really. I mean, this is amazing, this setup that you've got here, but you can do it from your home too if you had to, just to build it up, just like Joe Rogan did, and that worked out pretty good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Okay, so you found like a passion of yours is to be on the microphone, you want to chat with people, it's probably built a lot of really cool connections for you. And so it's kind of diving into a passion of yours. And do you feel like that drives your energy to keep going? And do you see yourself burning out from this as well?
No, you're spot on. I mean, it's like cliche to say, like, do something you're passionate about so it doesn't feel like
Yeah.
work, but it really is true, man. It really is
Yeah.
true. If you love what you do, I mean, I always say, like, to me, every day is Monday or every day is Friday. They're all the same to me. It doesn't matter. I can't wait to get to work in the morning. You know, the show is once a week, but we've got so many shows at the studio that I help book guests for and stuff like that
Yeah.
on the creative side. So I'm always, in the podcasting space 24 hours a day. And I love it. You know, I love meeting the people, and it doesn't feel like work, and so it makes it easy to always be working.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I see business like that as well in my own life. It's not just like, oh, well, when I'm done doing business, I'll go live my life. Like I see it as my life. Business is what I do. That is what I enjoy doing. And I've made it something that's fun for me. And I enjoy doing it every day. And like you said, I don't feel like it's a Friday or a Monday or Saturday. It's always just I'm living my life, and part of my life is business. So do you see business as like a tool just in your life, or do you see it as like, oh, this is just what I do? Or do you want to eventually maybe have a separation between this is my business and this is my personal life?
Yeah, it's interesting. Wow, I never thought about that. Yeah, it is all interconnected for sure. I mean, I always feel like even when I'm out, tomorrow night I'm going to the Power Slap event over at the UFC.
The power slap.
Yeah,
Ooh.
have you seen this yet? Slap
No.
fighting? Oh my God, it's Dana White's taking it to the next level. You know what the UFC is, obviously.
Yep. Yeah.
That's right. I owe you a fight. We got to go to a fight next
Let's
year.
do it.
But now he's got Power Slap, which is this crazy thing. Two guys standing right in front of each other.
Yeah.
You're literally standing there with your hands at your sides, and you're just letting a guy tee off on you with an open hand slap. Austin, this is the craziest thing you've
My
ever
goodness.
seen. Yeah, I'm going to show you some clips on Instagram when we're done with this. It is wild. And literally guys get knocked out cold.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. And
Wow.
then there's some guys that just take it and shake it off. It's a really fun thing to do live. But the point of
Yeah.
bringing it up was there's going to be 50 or 60 influencers there tomorrow night.
Mm.
So I'm going for fun.
Yeah.
I'll inevitably end up doing a lot of networking and maybe get my next 4, 5, 6 podcast guests out of it and hang out with Dana and and it's fun. It doesn't feel like that's work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that that's going to continue for a long time, or do you
Yeah.
see a separation maybe in the future?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's just in me. Like it's just how I'm hardwired, It's
Yeah.
like work is play and play is work, and they all just kind of connect. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my time, my girlfriend, whatever, that we switch off and we go do date night or whatever, but it's a fun kind of business too, so it doesn't ever feel like I'm buried. Even when I am buried with work, it doesn't feel like overwhelming to the point where I need a break. I don't ever say, oh, I need some time off. Like, I don't even know what that means. You're
Yeah.
the same way. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So it sounds like you found an ideal spot in business that, you're happy with it. You're passionate about what you're doing and you don't need time off. And I think that many people can actually get there. But I think you have to improve the way that your business runs to run a better business to do that. So if somebody's watching this and they're like, hey, Jon, like, how can I run my business better so I could have a life like yours? How can I enjoy what I'm doing? How can I find my passion project?
To have a business that runs better and optimal, you've got to have the right team. I mean, that's one thing I learned from the PR firm. We stumbled a lot because we didn't have the right team.
Okay.
A lot of times I felt like we had the right team. I saw people for what their potential was rather than what they are. And that was kind of a mistake. I mean, it's good to cultivate talent around you.
Yeah.
It's good to cultivate your team and try to train your team and help take them to the next level. But you also have to be realistic and realize, like, if I'm expecting this person to be like Barry Bonds for what they do, I need to realize when you're not going to be Barry Bonds and make a change or put them in a different role, or in some tough cases, release them. Having the right team has been instrumental. And I've got a rock star squad over there. You met a lot of them when you came over and you did the podcast. Like, they're all 24, 25 years old, and they can run circles around me even. I mean, they're really talented kids. I call them kids. They're young men and women, but they really are fantastic. And that's been the difference of what's allowing us to scale to the point where we can franchise and we can do things, because we know we can own and operate podcast studios anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. And I trust my guys to train that team that's going to be handling that specific location.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if somebody's looking to find the right team, how did you find your team? Do you find that you just attracted them because you have a brand, you have this presence, and people were attracted to you, or did you have to go find them?
Again, I got luck. Maybe not the answer you want, Austin, but I'm being honest with you. I used to rent studio time down the street from where my studio is here in Vegas. And the engineer there was this kid, Travis Flesher, and he was 20 or 21 at the time. Now he's 25. And he ended up quitting that studio, and I about had a meltdown because I was like, what am I going to do without this? You know, you get used to having the same engineer week in and week out, and he's cutting your clips, and he knows what you want, and he knows the flow of your show. You want that guy, you know? And so when he said he was leaving, I had a panic attack, you know? And I was like, wait, why are you going? And he was like, yeah, I'm just over it. And I was like, you're over it here, or you're just over it as a whole? Like, if it's just you're over it for where you're working, I can fix that. I'll go open a studio tomorrow. And that's literally what I did.
Wow.
And partnered up with him and made him a partner. And, you know, he's been instrumental, and he's the one that has found the whole team over there and trained him. A lot of them are people that he knew, you know, went to school together here in Vegas and so forth. And he's been amazing over there, and he's been the difference.
So that seems to be an element of many successful businesses. It's not like you might be the guy with the idea, you might be the guy with the strategy, but you need a strong partner.
Yeah.
And can you talk more about that?
Yeah, you need a strong partner, and you need to realize you can't and shouldn't do everything on your own. That was my problem with the PR firm. And I don't want to say I was a control freak, but certainly leaned that way. You know, and I would nitpick things. And, you know, I remember once I'm going to go a long-winded way to answer your question, but I remember we owned a poker site called Bombshell Poker at one point when I was at the PR firm, like kind of a passion project within the PR firm. And I remember the logo, the O in Bombshell was a pair of lips. So Bombshell Poker we trained a bunch of models how to play poker, and they went and did events all over Las Vegas, all over the world in casinos and stuff. And it was a poker site, you know, when poker was booming back then. And, you know, I remember the logo was this set of lips. And I remember being at the Sundance Film Festival. We were about to launch the site. And I wouldn't let us launch the site because I was like, no, the shade of red is wrong. And my partner, Andrew, called me up, and he was like, okay, listen, he was very successful. He's, you know, made hundreds of millions of dollars in his career, whatever. And, you know, he was like, okay, listen, you got to stop. Like, you can make a running list every week of all the changes you want to make to the site, and you turn it in every Friday. And by Monday, I'll have the changes updated. And then the following week, same thing. And you can just keep this running list of things that make Jon Orlando unhappy. But right now, it's time for us to push the go live button. Don't worry about the shade of red of the lips. And it really was a good lesson that I finally learned. And that's what carried it over to like, okay, I'm too controlling. I'm bottlenecking my business, right? Because I'm putting a roadblock in the sales funnel. I'm putting a roadblock in any vertical that the business has. I kept roadblocking. And part of it was because I didn't have the right team, so I didn't trust them. So I felt like I had to take over. And so my solution was me taking over, when my solution should have been replace the pieces in charge of those departments, the people in those departments, so that they can get in their own lane and they can be effective. So I don't bottleneck everything, because you can't do everything yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like such a good lesson in that. I hope everybody's hearing you, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
100%.
Yeah. And it's like all these things, I would venture to bet that there's so many people watching this right now that they probably haven't pressed that green play button. They probably haven't launched that site. They haven't started that business. They haven't launched that new product line just because they feel like it's not perfect.
Yeah, you're right. I won't call them out and mention names, but there are 3 specific pretty famous people that want to start doing podcasts at our studio. And we've been having this conversation for 3 to 6 months. And I keep getting texts from each one of them saying, hey, I'm ready to go. I just want to make sure I have these 3 guests lined up, or I want to get this logo right, or this, whatever. And I'm like, man, just start. Just start the show. Don't get hung up on making sure you have the first 4 dream guests, because they're going to cancel on you. One of them is going to cancel. Something's going to happen. Something's going to come up. You just got to roll with it.
Absolutely. And there's something powerful in just that momentum. I find that, success comes with momentum. If you're not moving, you can't be successful no matter what. So if you don't get started, you don't press that play button, you won't, for sure, you won't see success. But if you at least start gaining some momentum, you start forward movement, at that place you can course correct, right?
Yep.
You can steer left or right, wherever you need to go to adjust, but you have to establish that momentum. And so the first piece of success then is momentum. So if somebody's watching this and maybe they've already started that business and they've already pressed the play button and now they're like, okay, there's so many levers that I can pull to run a better business. Maybe I need to improve my marketing. I need to improve my, sales team, whatever it might be. What have you seen to be the biggest levers in your business that have made your business better? Was it just making sure that your fulfillment is top notch? Was it, like what part of your business do you feel like has the biggest impact?
Hands down, you just hit it on the head. Fulfillment, top notch, service, customer service, the customer experience.
Yeah.
When people come in, from the second they walk into that studio, they feel like they're in good hands. A lot of people are first-time podcasters, so they're nervous. They're worried about, especially like the girls are always worried about how do they look on camera, which is a normal thing. We all want to make sure we look good on camera, but it's making them feel comfortable and making them not be so hard on themselves, because you could, that again, it goes back to the strive for perfection, right? Of course, we all want it to be as good as possible, but not to the point where it's crippling you or holding you back, and just learning to it's a lot when you're putting yourself out there and you do a show like this, you experience it, you're on social media, you're going to get the haters, you're going to get, the people that say, it's so funny. I've seen so many comments on podcast pages on Instagram where the comment is, the host talks too much. Like, you're on a podcast, you're talking. Like, I know what they mean by that sometimes. They step over people, but you got to be open to the criticism. And you also have to know, let some of it just roll off your shoulder, but also be open to, are they right? Like, is some of the criticism valid? If everyone's in the comments saying the same thing, you have to be open to, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm, I need to be more serious, or I need to tell more jokes. I need to loosen up, or whatever the feedback is. You have to be open to receiving it.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of times, I've seen people say like amazing things and they're just like, you're so great, you're this and that, and also negative things. Yeah. And I think that we have to realize as, entrepreneurs, as business people, that you're never as good as they say you are and you're never as bad as they say you are. And that's kind of like the balancing factor that just allows you to bring it back to baseline and like, okay, maybe this is the right thing to do. They like this, or this is working, or this is helping my customers. Or maybe I'm talking too much on the podcast,
Right.
So that's part of that course correction though. And so you've talked a little bit about even like franchising.
Yeah.
Now, I have never been in the world of franchising, so I'm very excited to even myself learn about some more of this. But can you kind of talk through what does that look like? Like, how does that even start?
There's
like
a lot of rules. So I partnered with a guy that knows it back to front. He was
again strategic partnerships.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, like you can't do everything, and that's the other thing. Like, to touch on that, it's like entrepreneurs, you cling to the equity. Right? When you're starting something, you've got 100% and you don't want to give up anything.
Yeah.
But there really is, you got to realize, like, sometimes you got to give up, it's like the old saying, right? 50% of something's worth a bit more than 100% of nothing. And you can play that game with any number, right? On that chain. So I partnered up with this guy, Mark Sturman, who was in on Massage Envy. Early on, have you heard of Massage?
Oh yeah, it's a big franchise.
Like 1,400 locations or something crazy. So he knows the franchise game back to front.
Yeah,
and, it's been really interesting. Like, you have to be very everything has to be written up. You basically have to write a Bible for your company of from start to finish. Just imagine, like, things we take for granted, like how do you start a podcast? What's the process? Like, all of that stuff. The show, what happens in post, to all of that, the marketing, everything. Like, you have to basically put that into an owner's manual, essentially. And so just going through those exercises has been really time intensive, and but it's been eye opening. But we're really excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's kind of like documenting that whole process from A to Z, every little thing that happens, and at the end of the day, it's like SOPs. You're building SOPs and helping somebody duplicate what you're doing. So are you planning to have like a totally different team there? Can in your new locations, or are you sending your core team to start it up and then hiring?
Yeah.
Or
Travis has, we got lucky with this. This is the first one. So we haven't sold a franchise yet. We're not quite ready yet. So the first like 4 or 5 are just gonna be corporate stores, essentially.
But they're still franchises, but just owned by you.
We own them, right? Yeah. But they're technically not franchises yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Because we own and operate them, but they
so it's only considered a franchise if somebody else owns it.
Right.
Got it.
So we got lucky with this first one in terms of who's working over there. We had a relationship with the 2 kids that were working at a different podcast studio, and they
poaching all this talent, man.
Well, they actually got fired, which is crazy. So, and yeah, it's crazy, and it's like even Travis here, my guy here, who you met, I think, crazy. Like he quit because he felt undervalued, and it's like it's wild to me how anyone could have undervalued this guy. Like he's so sharp, he's so great with people. You know, I don't know. It's wild. So Travis went down and trained. You know, there was minimal training with those guys because they knew Travis knew them. But Travis has really got a good eye for talent. Like I feel like I have a really good eye for like who would be good to host a podcast. Travis has that eye behind the scenes. With people. So he's really great at finding them and teaching them, and he's all about systems and process and workflow, and you know, it makes it really easy. Yeah.
So what, like in this whole process, what would you say were your biggest challenges in trying to get to the franchise model? Like if somebody's listening to this, they're like, I'm considering it. What do they have to look forward to?
With owning a podcast studio?
No, just franchising a business.
Just franchising a business. Well, making sure that business is successful to start with, right? Is obviously key. And is
there like a goal that you set? Like we make 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and then franchise?
Just month over month profitability and hopefully a hockey stick, curve, or steady growth, is really key. And we've been lucky. We opened up the studio here in March 21. We opened it with $50K. It's not a lot of money. I mean, you can't do this with $50K, but you've been over there. It works.
No, it's a good studio.
And we never looked back. We've been profitable since month 1, which is crazy. And it's been all word of mouth, which speaks to customer experience as being the number one thing, right? We spent 0 money advertising. I'm not saying I recommend that, but it's worked out for us here. And I think that's because the word of mouth from the time you walk in to you sit down and record the show, and then what we deliver in post, it's top notch. And so the word spreads itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to talking about like fulfillment and client experience. And if that's top notch, there was an interesting discussion I saw. I believe it was Alex Hermosi. He was saying essentially you could sell to one customer and never have to sell again. As long as your service is so top notch that customer is going to sell to somebody else or refer somebody else and another person.
Yeah.
And you could technically never have to market, not even have a sales team, maybe some form of sales team. But at the end of the day, that one first experience that you gave to that person is going to sell the whole, in perpetuity.
Yeah. So, I mean, a good example of that I feel is 10X Health. I mean, right? Gary Brecker worked with Dana White and the rest is history. I mean, he shouted it from the mountaintops, myself included. And then I told everyone, I got on it and I told everyone, and now I've got probably 40 or 50 friends on it. And it's so true. If you the right happy customer can take you to the goal line. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. So, I think one thing that people who are running a business in today's day and age, we can't ignore the fact that technology is stepping in a lot. So I know like in the podcast studio, you guys are using a lot of tech. Do you see yourself using more AI than you were previously? Are you planning to, or like?
Yeah. It's funny you say that. So I come in one day and I start raving to George, the guy that engineers my show and that really takes Action Junkies under his wing. And I'm raving about this podcast description. Like, man, you've taken it to the next level. Like you really put the time. I read the whole description. and he's just thanking me and he's smiling. And I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. I'm like, I think he thinks I'm pulling his chain. I'm like, no, I'm serious, George. Like, this looks amazing. And then he comes clean. He's like, it's Chat GPT. I was like, wait, what? And he was like, yeah. And then when I read it again, I was kind of mad at myself that I couldn't. Of course, George didn't write that. Like, not that he's a bad writer, but the level of detail. I have since I go back and forth with it a little bit. Like, I think it's too over. Like, the first time I read it, I was like, okay, this is cool. Now, like, we're still doing it, and I feel like it's not quite there yet. Like, it still needs us. We need to, like, get in there and
human touch, and
it needs a human touch. It's a little too over the top with it, you know. So I kind of want to dial that down. But I mean, it's only going to get better, and it's really interesting. I've been talking to this group. They have a company called Second Self. It's an AI platform. I should actually introduce you to them. It's an AI platform that they're predominantly working with, like, OnlyFans models right now for, like, the chat, you know. But they've got, you know, a roadmap to work with entrepreneurs and stuff where it could make sense, you know, business advice, you know, your second self, right?
Like, duplicates the person. Okay.
As this is like, it's coming from you, right? And I kind of been toying with, like, I want to do, like, an AI podcast with just AI podcasters of people. Could be kind of an interesting thing to do. But I mean, it's interesting. I'm older, so I don't always embrace tech and change. But I'm trying to, you know, I'm still, you know, I'm more old school with a lot of things, but it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm curious to see what happens with the election and AI. I think it's going to wreak havoc on the world personally. Because I think we thought there was, you know, misinformation in 2020. I think now it's going to be a free for all, because I think both sides are going to use AI against each other, right? It's like, I'm really curious to see how all of this unfolds. But I think AI is obviously going to be a big part of every business. And it's just a matter of figuring out how do you use it to the best of your advantage.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it kind of, like, I don't see AI as, like, totally replacing a workforce or anything like that. I see it as, like, that little extra, you know, cream on top of the pie, or whatever it is, to improve what you have going on in your business.
For sure.
And in many cases, even if it's just something like customer service or fulfillment or sales, you can add an AI element to improve that process. And so it could potentially create leverage, right? So one form of leverage that I think people don't really talk about too much is human capital leverage. So we can leverage money at the bank, we can leverage time, but leveraging human capital is interesting, because now, instead of having maybe 10 salespeople, I could have AI do the work of 10 salespeople and have one salesperson managing it or running it, or same thing with support or fulfillment, whatever it is. So I think that's definitely something that people should look into and see how they can implement AI in what they're doing.
Yeah, so I agree with you.
Yeah. So as you've scaled your companies, I know you've scaled multiple businesses, and what would you say has been, like, the biggest win for you in scaling? Like, where did you start? Where you're like, okay, I'm just going to boost sales, or I'm going to market more. Like, what did you do to scale your company?
Boosting sales, to me, that, you know, that's always the answer. Sales answers almost every business question, or solves almost every business question to some extent, right? Obviously, there's a lot like fulfillment and all that stuff, but as long as sales is healthy, you can work everything else out. It's like the thing that's going to cripples you, obviously, is cash flow, right? So if you raised money and you burned through it too quick, now you got a problem. You got to go raise more. You know, you're always in that money, you know, that money grind. So that's what I like to always focus on. You know, it's funny, even at home, like, my girlfriend sometimes she'll be like, hey, we shouldn't eat out so much. We got to save money to do the pool and the this and the that. And I'm like, nope, got to make more. Like, it's just always my answer is offense, not defense, you know? And I think if you focus on the offense, you focus on the sales, and you get creative, and you figure out, you know, okay, how can I get more money out of my existing customer base as a start, right? Because obviously getting new customers is a challenge, right? And that's a little harder, but, like, how do I maximize? And it all goes back to fulfillment, right? If they're not happy, you know, it's like a domino effect, right? But as long as you've got happy customers, how can I get an extra, you know, 10, 15% out of them a month across 40 or 50 customers? And all of a sudden, you're healthy again, or, you know, you're reaching your new goals. And so that's what really we've focused on a lot. That's where I failed at the PR firm, was I was always spread so thin, again, because I didn't have the right team. I was always having to go find new business because our turnover was bad,
Yeah.
because we couldn't keep them happy once we got them. So I was always like chasing, I was like the hamster
New
on the
business,
wheel,
yeah.
right? So it's really important that you have both of those going, but definitely don't ever neglect your sales and make sure you've got the right people out there selling for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I've learned in business is that your sales team, it's a direct reflection of you and your brand.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the only John that they'll ever speak to is your salesperson. So your salesperson has to be a good reflection of you because that could be the only interaction they ever have with your company. And so whether
Yeah.
that's positive or negative, that's going to reflect on you. Now, you mentioned something very important. Getting additional sales out of existing clients.
Yeah.
And I think people just forget about that. They're just like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I sold to that person. Now time for the next deal.
Right.
But why not provide more value to this person? Why not find more products, integrate into what you're already doing so that they have a reason to buy more from you? And it's not just a
Absolutely.
matter of like, upcharging them or charging more for your existing services,
Correct.
but adding additional things that would help them and they'll be happy
Right.
to pay you for them.
Bring more value and get more money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it starts with having a great relationship with that client.
Yeah.
Which you got to make sure once you get their money that
Yep.
you're not just moving on to the next, right? And you're
Yeah.
treating them properly and really, it's like we always say, like, we're not transactional at
Yeah.
the studio, and it goes a long way. And sometimes we take the L, in the deal or whatever it is to prove to them that we've got the value, and then
Mhm.
and upsell them accordingly when we need to. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're locked in. It is what it is. But as long as everyone's getting the good experience,
Yeah.
it goes back to, like you said, they'll tell someone and they'll tell someone and they'll tell someone, and you've
Yeah.
got a business.
Absolutely. Have you ever had a big gap between maybe in your PR company where you had so many sales come in that your fulfillment team couldn't keep up?
Absolutely. And it's funny you just said that. I even have it sometimes at the studio here. The
Yeah.
running joke at the studio is Travis makes a sad face when I come in and I go, I landed 2 new clients, and he looks miserable because in his head, he's thinking, okay, we're still small. We have maybe
Yeah.
5 or 6 full-time people over there.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people are wearing different hats. We just this month decided to compartmentalize. Now there's engineers, people that only engineer, people that only edit, people that only produce, where
Yeah.
before everyone was doing everything, and things were falling through the cracks because we had fulfillment issues that we had to fix. And
Yeah.
Travis was like, "Look, we're gonna do this and have different departments, but
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. So we're actually gonna get worse, and people are gonna be mad." So,
Yeah.
I went out and sent an email to everyone, and then I called every single client individually or texted them and said, "Hey, just want you to know we're about to have some growing pains. So things might get a little wonky over here.
Yeah.
Bear with us. Like, we know it. I'm just warning you ahead of time." And it goes a long way because you're basically saying, hey, look, we're going to do a crappy job for a minute. We're going to try not to, but we're just being realistic. Things are going to get a little funky over here.
Yeah.
Just bear with us. And when you get out in front of it like that, I think people respect it because they go, okay,
Yeah.
it's like you care rather than just doing it. And did they notice? Like, did they notice it went up late? Did they notice the clips are messed up? Whatever it is.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a great strategy, I think, that people can implement. Like if your sales are outpacing your fulfillment, just let people know. Get out ahead of it, talk to them because they understand, they're people too.
Right.
And just explaining what it is that you're not neglecting them, you're not meaning to provide a bad service or maybe a delay in service, whatever it is, but you're just setting them up for future success because once you do go through that process, you're going to be fulfilling a lot better for them.
Right.
And they just got to bear with you. So okay, cool. That's a very interesting topic for me. Now, also, have you ever raised money for your business, or have you always just kind of bootstrapped it?
No, I've raised money. It's the worst, most awful part of the business that I hate.
Raising money or working out of a business?
Raising it.
Okay.
It's just tough. It's been everything. Sometimes it's really easy. It's funny. Over the years, like people that I thought this guy's definitely going to give me money for this idea isn't into it. And then people that I wasn't even going to present it to, but did basically out of desperation were the quickest, easiest yes. And it goes back to, I used to work at a shoe store when I was in college.
Yeah.
And I remember the guy that ran the store used to say, don't qualify people when they come in. Meaning if they're wearing a Rolex or they pull up in a Bentley, it doesn't mean they're going to be a big customer. And if they pull up in a Volkswagen, it doesn't mean they're going to be a bad customer. Just treat them all the same. It's hard to do because it's instinctively, you know, when you see someone that looks like the total package or whatever, you think, oh my God, this guy's going to be, this is a big sale right here. I'm going to get. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And it's that way when it comes to raising money too. It's always, I always pine away over like projections. It's like you want to make them sexy enough that it gets people excited, but you also want to make it attainable, under promise, over deliver. Sometimes, some of these projections, especially when it was like when we were doing the poker site, it's like, it's going to do 50 million a month. Like,
we promise.
Right. It's like, it's hard to walk that balance. And I like pitching. I like pitching people I don't know. I hate going to people I know for money. Maybe that's my own issue I got to get over. But I always don't want it to be uncomfortable, doing business with friends. Like, it's weird. It's important to do business with friends because that's your network, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to ruin relationships. So you got to make sure you're always putting your best foot forward. And when you take someone's money, whether you know them or not, like, you got to be accountable to those people. And it goes back to same thing, like, telling all the clients like, hey, it's going to be rough. I think the mistake entrepreneurs make is it doesn't mean you have to be perfect just because you went and raised money. And it doesn't mean you have to be mistake free. You're going to make mistakes. Logical, rational investors know that you're going to make mistakes. They're hoping you make less mistakes than you have wins, right? It's just, I think open communication is really key when it comes to that. So that you can really be honest with what's going on. We just had a call literally yesterday about the franchise stuff. And we had to call with the investor, and we kind of had to take an L and be like, yeah, our 6 months report card, we're going to give us a D, maybe a C, but we know why. And we know how to fix it. And we had, and we told them what our plan was, and they were like, yeah, we agree. We get it, And I think just it comes down to communication.
Yeah. So for people who are maybe looking to scale their business or maybe are just starting out in business, would you recommend as raising capital to do that? Or do you feel like it's maybe better later on, like when you're wanting to franchise or something like that?
I think it's case by case. I think the important thing to do is if you do go raise money, don't celebrate that as like it's income. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, right? They're like, woohoo, we raised 500,000, whatever. Like, okay, you just took 500,000, sold a piece of your company, and now you got to be accountable not just to you and your employees, but now to this person that gave you money or persons that gave you money. So I think it's case by case. I think it just depends. I think you just got to make sure you have a plan how to spend it, and make sure you could stretch that out as much runway as you can. Because where you don't want to be, and I've been in this position before, is you burn through that first round. And then you're in a, oh my God, I need to go raise some money quick, or else in 60 days or less, we got to shut the doors. Like, you want to make sure you don't put yourself in that situation. Because I've been in that situation, and it's brutal. Was able to bail myself out of it, but when you're Austin, when you're a comedian on a Friday and then you decide you're a businessman on a Monday, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. So I made a lot of those mistakes early. I think I make less now than I did in my younger years, but we're still human. Sometimes we botch the play.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Thanks for coming on here, man. Thank you for sharing your business experience. I know people will definitely get some value out of that. And you brought up some very interesting points that I think people can apply to their businesses to run a better business themselves, even about like raising capital and running a successful team. I think that is like a huge thing for people, and pressing that play button before you think it's perfect. And just getting started. So where can people find you if they want to reach out and even go to your studio? My personal Instagram is just Jon Orlando. It's just Jon. I got no H. And then the studio that we have here is Sticky Paws Studios. We're on Instagram and all that stuff as Sticky Paws Studios. And the podcast is Action Junkies, Junkeez. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Well, you guys heard it from Jon Orlando yourself. And thank you for watching this episode, and we'll see you all on the next one.